Hi, everybody. Welcome to Embercombe Online tonight. We're just waiting for everybody just to come in from the waiting room. Lovely to see you. Can you let me know, Cindy, when everyone's in?
Yeah, I think we're all here.
Fantastic. It feels strange to be doing this in the daylight somehow. It feels like normally we're in the dark. It's obviously been a while, but lovely to see you here. Tonight we're really excited because we are talking about making with wild materials and how that can really connect us to our land, our place, and the magical process of transformation that is involved with that. The speakers tonight are all wonderful makers who we have coming to Embercombe next week to actually have a residential on our land, which is a wonderful thing in itself. So we thought we'd take this opportunity just to open them up to an online audience and to record this for posterity and just really catch up with them and find out where they are and hear their making stories. So really our discussion tonight will be around material and how working with us really makes us more human. And we have Nick Kary, who is a furniture maker and a longtime friend of Embercombe and has written a wonderful book called Material. And he told me what the subtitle was before we came on. And the only thing the subtitle that I wanted to remember was how working with our hands makes us humans. We have Jessie Watson-Brown, again, a long-time friend of Embercombe, who is very interested in the making journey and connecting with our wild natures. And we have Elizabeth Crawford, who's a basket weaver and works with wild plants. So brilliant, lovely to have you all here and lovely to have you in our audience. We'll probably talk for about 40 minutes. We'll open up to questions then. And first of all, Nick, I'd love to start with you reading a little bit from your book, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, Rachel, yep. I picked a section which, for those of you who know the New Forest at all, on the River Bewley, there's a place called Buckler's Hard, which was a boatyard back in the 1800s. And one of my chapters in the book was written about it. And I was trying to imagine how it was with the forest there, with the boatyard there, with boats being sent all over the world. And the trades just using very simple techniques, crafting huge boats, enormous great boats, which took up to 40 acres of wood for one single boat. And this is a little bit from that chapter. I'm trying to give a sense of the ecology of the boatyard, of its nature, derived from the wilder nature beyond it. The yard was a sanctuary within the wildness of the forest, a place of endeavor and transformation, where a tradesman's bodily and mental facility allowed for the conversion of materials to purpose. The floor of the yard, alive with various stages of timber in transition, was little like the forest floor, on which decaying timber and vegetative matter were broken down by moisture, time, and fungi, to form the soil on which new life would grow. In the yard of Buckler's Hard, standing timber was manipulated to the form of a ship, generating jobs, industry, and development, and all their positive and negative consequences. There are remnants of the slipways on which the boats were built 200 years ago, but only one is relatively intact. A model in the museum shows how the village would have looked when it was a boat building centre, the main street full of wood, the houses dwarfed by the ships in construction. Around the village, there were great piles of logs, animals grazing, and vegetable plots. It was a community of shipwrights, carpenters, sawyers, carters, carvers, overseers, and general hands. The ships that rise up out of the model rose to full size on the now decayed slipways a long time ago. And the workmen whose model figures hit, saw, adze, and and carve really did those things day in, day out, each acclimatized to his role like a cog in a smoothly operating watch. Work set to the daily rhythm of village life. Time ran to it as well as it to time. The hammer blows started at dawn and finished at dusk. Rain and sun accompanied the tasks. Little shelter from either available to the men working to naval deadlines. I might imagine myself in this scene, a model come to life. What role would I choose? Whom would I want to work alongside? I think I'd choose to be an apprentice to the shipwright who is setting out the knees onto the elm keel that lies massively on chocks along the sunken slipway. I would be set up near the skeleton that was slowly coming alive. My instructions were to dress the ribs ready for their fitting to the knees. These forms would have been mapped out from the drawings and copied out onto patterns in the mold loft, where there was ample dry space. I would have selected some pre-cut shapes from a pile, inspected them for soundness and the appropriateness of their form. I would transfer the markings from the template to these forms and get my tools prepared. I assume that the forms were already close and I am merely adjusting them with the help of the adze. I'd have my own canvas bag of tools made of robust hemp. I would draw out of my bag a couple of adzes, one long handle with a wide flat blade set 90 degrees to the handle, which protruded through the robust back of it. Another was smaller, with a narrower curved blade where more material needed removing. Other tools lying in the bag would have included a broad chisel, a gouge, a set of compasses and a mallet. It was not the tool bag of a furniture maker, not tools of great sophistication, rather tools made by the apprentice with the help of a local smith. Selecting the large flat adze, I would position myself over the curved oak form lying on the ground, and standing with one foot in it would swing the adze rhythmically as I worked from the back of the piece to the front. Each blow of the tool removing a clean chip that ended in the hollow left by the previous blow. As I moved along the rib, it would gradually narrow and conform more closely to the pattern whose shape dictated its own. All control was in my relationship with the tool, with the confidence in my swing, the relaxed and intentioned movement that I would initiate and the gravity would aid. My nature would ideally be in harmony with that of the tool, the wood and the environment I worked in, the air and the light of day. I know from my own work that a tool like an adze, without guides or sophisticated engineering, soon reflects back to you if there's any doubt, any tiredness, any lack of proper preparation in the wielder's endeavors. If my body were not in harmony with the environment it found itself in, with its position over the wood, with a thinking mind to hamper it, I would struggle to work smoothly. The adze, hitting the wood just a slightly incorrect angle, would either bounce off or dig in too much. For each blow improperly done, my body would tense and compound the mistake. All this, chip after chip, to do a job that today is done on a bandsaw or computerized milling machine in a fraction of the time. Imagine the skill it takes, though, the risk and the need for total presence. Hard labor it would be, yet within it, to really make it work, there is something that transcends labor, a spirit which connects the human, the task, and the transformation. There is magic here. The ship grows from the individual components and efforts of each craftsman involved in the process. Over a year or so, a large ship, already years in the making in terms of planning, financing, and the procurement and seasoning of the timber, would gradually grow out of the keel on which it is first laid. It is the backbone of the craft, and like the backbone of an animal, carries the weight and purpose of what attaches to it. The strength and integrity of the ship rely, as they do in the animal, on the skeletal structure within which its purpose lives. The skeleton carries organs, muscles, ligaments, covered in skin. It is smooth to the touch as it wields influence over a lifetime. So too, the wooden vessel, crafted from wood, skeletal in form, holding and housing objects, products, and the humans that work in it. The whole covered to be watertight and smooth, to cut through the waves and fulfill the purpose for which it was created. When finished, the chocks holding it are hit out of the way on a high tide, and the unmasted boat is floated out down the river, first to be masted, and then to set sail on the open sea.
Wow, thank you, Nick. That feels like it set the scene of what we're talking about. But the thing that really leaps out at me from that is there is magic in it. And I feel that that's kind of where we're going in our conversation tonight. And I wanted to ask all of you about your journey with making and where you feel that magic or what that magic is about. And I'll come back to you in a minute, Nick, but Jessie, I wondered maybe whether you'd start us off on that, kind of your making journey. Where's the magic for you?
Hi, hello. I mean, I feel like I've been a maker my whole life. I remember totally as a child, that's what thrilled me. But for me, rediscovering it as an adult, as an integral part of my journey, reconnecting with nature, I feel like is where the magic is for me, in a way that it builds that bridge for me, because it makes me part of the natural world. You know, there's this sort of old camping thing that we should leave no trace, and actually as humans we've always, and every animal always leaves a trace, but you know, the leave no trace idea is about litter or, you know, plastic or destruction. But I'm really with like what is our place in the web, and what kind of trace do we leave if we're really living from our true place in the web of life. And I feel like being a maker who's drawing natural materials from the world and creating beauty and function, and really helps for me build that bridge between the natural world and myself through my hands, through my body. So for me it's magic because it draws me back into relationship in a way that's ancient, I think. Yeah.
We talked about bringing some objects along just to show, to exemplify what we're talking about. I wondered, did you remember to bring one?
Yeah, I've got a few objects.
Just so that we can see the kind of things you do. So I've seen it and I know how beautiful these things are. So I just wondered if you could show us and maybe talk about it a bit.
Yeah, so my main craft is I'm a tanner, and I'm also then a leather worker. So my making has kind of two stages, because often people are tanners and then they just sell the leather on, or they're leather workers and they buy in the leather. So in terms of material, I kind of have this, I gather a raw material, I make it into a usable material, and then I use the material. So what I've brought, hope you can see, is I don't know if you can see it, it's my backpack. So it's got 2 straps there, and it's like a really good sized backpack, day pack, little buckles. So the leather is that an all right way to see it? The leather's the leather is wild deer from the forest in Devon. I live near the Tean Valley, so these are fallow deer that are culled in that valley, culled mostly for the preservation of the forest, and they throw the skins away. They keep the meat and sell the meat. So the skins are all gleaned from the local forest, and I tan them with oak bark from another forester locally. And so, yeah, so taking 2 wild raw materials and making something strong, kind of waterproof, durable, and that will last for a really long time. Yeah, so that's, and then making something out of it. So yeah, you know, and I love that, say if I walk through the forest on a hike, or walk on a hike with this bag, you know, that deer, the deer that went into this still having a relationship in another way with the land, feels like it's part of plastic backpack, you know. Yeah, so that's what I've brought.
Thank you. And I'm really interested in what you're doing at Embercombe next week, because, you know, obviously we don't have wild deer kind of around on our land. So I just wondered if you could mention what you're doing, because I think it's really...
Yeah, so, and a deer skin takes months to tan. So within a week course, we're not going to manage that. So we're going to be tanning fish leather. So it's the same process with tree bark. What I love about the skin of an animal and the skin of the tree, and you're kind of mixing them together in some alchemical magical process and making a new skin. So you're harnessing the protective properties of the tree bark and using it to protect the skin of the animal. Yeah, so this is a little fish leather. I don't know if you can see the texture on there. Is that working? Yeah. So fish leather has this incredible, because of the scales, incredible texture. So this is a little fish leather pouch. So this is the kind of thing that we will be able to make in a week together, tanning, and it's got a bit of leather on the side and an antler button. Yeah, so that's using fish leather.
You know, if anybody actually, because there's only a few of us, I mean, if anybody wants to ask any questions as we're going along, you know, do put your hand up. I said let's leave questions to the end, but actually it feels like it might be better if anybody wants to say anything or ask anything. There's the electronic hand button. Cindy, can you remind me where it is, because I always get it wrong?
Under the participants button.
Participant, so you can raise your hand there and I'll see you come up if you want to say anything as we go along. But thank you, Jessie. I'll come back to you in a minute. Elizabeth, I wanted to bring you in to talk about your making journey and what you find magical. I think the last time I saw you, you said, right, we're going to delve deep into the plant layer, and I just thought, God, how cool is that to know what you're doing deep in the plant layer. So yeah, what's making for you?
Yeah, so yeah, making, I think similarly to Jessie, has been something I've always had a yearning to do since I was a child. And at the moment I make baskets mostly. I've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years. But over my life, I've made all kinds of things. I've been a dressmaker and a doll maker. And yeah, I've just always needed to work with my hands to feel whole and to feel connected to the world beyond myself. And it's a lot to do with relationship and being deeply drawn to the other than human world and wanting a way to really connect with it, like really deeply connect and entwine with it. And in my life early on, I wasn't really given a way to do that. It was a bit of a mystery to me, like how did I meet this spirit that I felt out there? When I lived in a kind of in an urban area, and yeah, I didn't have a lot of nature connection in my childhood. So my journey with making has been a combination of learning about my imagination and the kind of things that I want to make and the kind of forms and creatures that want to kind of come out of me as a human being. And then there's also been this journey into nature and discovering what out in nature I can use to realize these visions that are within myself. And that has been magic. That is a magical journey for me. So when I make, it's not entirely practical or functional. There is an element of expression going on. And I think I'm drawn to plants because of a particular essence in plants that yeah, I don't know, it just compels me and captures my heart. For that reason, I'm also a herbalist. I've studied herbal medicine and I practice that, so I connect with plants on a lot of different levels. And I think I'm really inspired by this sense of how our ancestors would have moved across the landscape and just gathered plants as they went. And those plants would have been for all kinds of different things. They would have been for food, for medicine, for clothing, for weaving baskets. for shelter. Yeah, plants are incredibly generous, and they have been part of humanity's journey and survival since the very, very beginning. Yeah, so that's the magic for me.
Wow, I love the way you talk about plants. It makes me love plants as well. Yeah, have you brought something with you that you could maybe show us?
I have, yes. So I've bought a piece that I just finished recently. It's this basket, which is a kind of a bag pouch. This is the kind of thing I make. It's made from river rush and sedge. So these are soft plant materials that grow in the river. And they're very versatile. They're very flexible. You can twist them and twine them. They're the kind of plants that you'd make cordage from. But you can also use them to make, yeah, all kinds of items. And this is a bag that's got an opening lid with a hinge. So that's made from boxwood and hazel and willow. So there's a few different plants that I've collected and incorporated into this. And also some horn, some cow horn that I've carved. And the wool I didn't spin myself, but it's natural plant dyed wool. Yeah, and all of these plants were collected on the River Isle in Somerset last summer in June. So these plants were a year old, and when they were first harvested, they were very green. They had lots of lush colours, but over the time that they've sort of been curing and being woven, the colours have changed, and now they're a kind of golden colour. And yeah, that's one of the kind of the painful but also beautiful things about these kind of plants is they continue to change. They have their own process. They have their own cycle of growth and of dying. And yeah, there's only so much that harnessing them and using them kind of arrests that. So yeah, that's my little pouch.
It's stunning. Hi, Louise. Yeah, it's stunning. I agree. What kind of things do you think you'll be making with the Embercombe then at this time of year? Can you imagine what might be here, there to make with?
Yeah, so well, I was at Embercombe last week kind of scouting about to see what was there, and yeah, there's lots of wonderful plants. There's field rush, lots of field rush. There's plants in the lake like reed mace and iris. There's a few other plants in the woods, brambles we can turn into cordage. So we're going to be playing around with the different plants available and just getting a feel for their different qualities and properties, and then doing some kind of sample pieces and maybe a bigger piece depending on, you know, how people get to grips with the techniques. But there's lots of opportunities to kind of, yeah, make something beautiful and learn what the plants are capable of.
Wow, thank you. So moving from the plants to the trees, the fish and the plants to the trees, Nick, your making journey.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, listening to Jessie and Elizabeth speak so eloquently about their connection to their making. I was sort of thinking about my own journey. I think it's been rather more dissonant. I kind of always made, but I didn't even know I was making. I think it took me years to know what I was making, whether I was doing Airfix models or whether I was kind of carving out bits, old logs with my father's blunt chisels and not knowing where on earth I was going. I kind of distracted myself. And I think it took me a long time to realize that my making journey has essentially been a therapeutic journey. It's essentially been a method of connecting me to nature. Nature was where I always felt at peace. And I think it allowed me to feel my empowerment in the world, you know, having struggled, I think, quite a lot as a young man and to sort of feel a sense of place. Making gave me literally the tools, the material, the deeper connection to self. And it showed me my flaws, it showed me everything really. And, you know, to this day, I'm happiest among trees. You know, I think I've just got a sort of tree soul, and, you know, I spent quite a lot of my growing up in Austria and in Switzerland, and, you know, being in the mountains among the trees was always the happiest place for me to be. If I was ever unhappy, I would just go and sit under trees. It was just what I did. And here I am now, a furniture maker, and it was never intentional. I just remember leaving university and thinking, I don't want this sort of thinking life anymore. I want to be in my body. And I then did an apprenticeship and everything changed, and set out on this journey. And I think that unlike for Elizabeth and Jessie, who seem to have a real connection all the time to the raw material, so often for a furniture making is a funny old thing. You can actually be very disengaged from the source of the material, from the trees, because you go to yards, you buy the wood plank, square edged. And it took me some time to kind of rework my journey, to go and have my own trees felled, to take them to the yard, to get them stored to my specifications, to bring them back to the workshop, dry them, go through the whole process. The process that I described in part in the reading I did was part of the process that I engage with in my work now, but not the way I was trained.
Can we see something that you have made, Nick?
Well, it's a bit difficult with me because all my work's commissioned and it's very big, but
I can see loads of wood behind you. So
I built this building. It's my studio, which I've built. But what I've got to pick up the, I'm going to come down here and I've got two, let me see if I can do this. I've got two chairs here. Does that work?
Yeah.
And so this first chair, I was the first green wood chair I ever made with a oak tan leather seat. And I had an young apprentice in the workshop who was really, really struggling. I'll show you the other one in a second. And he was really struggling. And through an organization called Sylvanus, I got him a bursary and he got to go on a green woodworking course. And the chap running it said, "Do you want to come too?" And I said, "Oh, great." So I went along and I had a ball of a time, absolutely fantastic time. And because my normal work is more like this chair here. So this chair here would be more what I tend to do. So much more labored. A chair like this would take several weeks to make. Am I showing it clearly?
Yeah.
You know, with a carved seat and, oops, there we go. Anyway, and these two chairs are really, the space between these two chairs is the journey that I went on. But I did it backwards. So it's the high skill thing of the second chair, whereas the first chair is about accessibility. It's about ease. It's about working with wet wood. It's about allowing it to dry onto itself so it forms strong joints, not using glues. So all my teaching is now done in green wood because it's so much more accessible. If I was to teach making that chair, people would be sort of like, you know, not far off suicide a lot of the time.
So what? So we have a week. So you've got a week next week. We have lots of wood. What could you do in a week then?
I'm going to do a green wood stool, which I don't have an example. I forgot to bring one in. That's silly, isn't it? But that will have a solid wooden seat made out of semi-seasoned wood that I'll have to bring into Embercombe, because if we were to use Embercombe wood for that, it would split. So it's got to be sort of semi-seasoned. And the framework of that we'll basically bring down, well, my intention had been to bring down a tree with the participants, but I'm figuring because of time, Jessie and I, Elizabeth and I have talked about it, and that looks difficult. So Rich and I will do that prior to the course. And then it'll be lying on the ground and everyone will get the opportunity to look at it, to decide what bits are going to be appropriate to take from it, to begin to perceive the tree becoming material and to making its journey into becoming an object. It's that wonderful, wonderful sort of process of transformation. But the tree lying on the ground is a tree lying on the ground. It's not wood. Yeah.
Wow. There seems to be several themes in what you're saying that we could really investigate, but for me, there's something that keeps coming up about it's an ancient art, you know, it feels like something of our ancestry. I have to do this, Jessie, and I really apologize because I've seen you when I first met you. It was when you had spent a lot of time out in the wilds in the States, and your experience I found so moving that it comes up every time I see you, and I'm really going to have to ask you about it now. Could you just tell us a little bit about that and this kind of ancient kind of peeling back to kind of be out in the wild, without asking you to retell the whole story, but maybe if you could just give a flavour of that and how making comes into that.
Yeah, I'll try and be really brief. It's such a big piece. A bit like Nick, I never set out to be a tanner. Absolutely not. It came through this journey that you were talking about. So I was in the UK, I was sort of learning bushcraft and things, but I always felt like there must be something deeper. You know, you take your knives and your tarp and everything. So I found a teacher in the States who was teaching what she calls kind of Stone Age or primitive skills. And that allowed us to, after many months of making, like it was like intense, making intensive for many months, we were ready to go out to the wilderness in the Cascade Mountains, carrying, so every single thing we had with us, we had made ourselves from raw materials. So our clothes were tanned, our packs were baskets that we'd made, our food was wild and carried in skin bags, and we cooked in clay pots that we'd made. So it was like, it was every single thing, because that is how we would have lived for the majority of being human. Every single thing we would have had, we or our community members would have made from the raw materials. So, you know, it might not have been that every single person was a potter. You know, I feel like specialization probably happened early because we either love or have a skill in something. Yeah, so that for me was partly because I love making, but partly because I wanted to experience living as close to the earth as possible. You know, I love Gore-Tex. I live on Dartmoor. I'm going to say it. I love a good waterproof, but I know in some way it separates me because it means I don't have to be in relationship to the rain in the same way that I would if I didn't have a waterproof coat or a waterproof tent or something, you know. So for me, it was about stripping back everything that we've created that in some way separates us, and seeing what happens when we're totally in every way. Yeah, is that, yeah.
I'm muted, sorry. Yeah, thank you, Jessie. That, yeah, perfect. And Elizabeth, I wanted to ask you about the plant side of that as well, kind of the ancient going back to the healing properties. I mean, is there an ancientness with what you're doing that you feel coming through?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I haven't had the blessing of a deep immersion like Jessie. It sounds incredible, and yeah, I'd love to be able to go into that space some point. But yeah, I think that my my attraction to weaving is a lot to do with the fact that it's just such an ancient gesture. It's a movement of the hands that has been repeated by so many people over so many thousands of years. I was reading the other day that I think fragments of cordage have been found that are 50,000 years old, and there's evidence for cordage having been made like maybe up to 2 million years ago by very ancient, like this gesture of twisting and binding and knotting. is a way that like we can remember it through our bodies what our ancient ancestors would have done and how they would have built relationship with the material world around them. So I'm just looking at my basket while I speak because I've just kind of seen what it has to say to me. Yeah, it does feel like just that simple process. It's not necessarily the product, but that process of making in a certain way and using the materials in a certain way, in a way that they dictate they themselves be used, definitely feels beyond this time.
Yeah, the ancient beating heart of the maker, as it I think is a phrase that we've used when we've talked about this before. Do you think it's possible that we will return to a kind of world where things are all handmade? I mean, Nick, do you kind of, how did your book conclude, which I haven't read yet, but I hope to at some point soon? You're on mute.
Here I am. I'll be right back. I wouldn't have dared tackle such a question in a book. It's an impossible question to ask. Everything's against us in so many ways. And you know, I think I've got to the place where there is really only one thing that works for all of this. And don't shoot me down, but it's love. Because if we love what we do and we don't quantify it with worth and value based on financial measurement, if we're in relationship through our own presence and through exchange with others, we kind of need to change the world in order to re-engage with making being part of our lives. We would have to have a revolution. And in a way, my book, when I finished it, I realized what it was a quiet little revolution. It was kind of a quiet scream into the dark. Because when you quantify things financially, none of it makes sense. I mean, one of my pieces, if it pays me properly, sells for many, many thousands of pounds. I can't afford my own work. So we have to change the way we relate. And one of the ways is by people making more at home, by making happening. No, it's not about professionals, really. If you professionalize it, you trip over your own feet. We have to have the relationships back in the house, back in the homestead. And we have to, even if it's, you know, I think I said something in the book I just came across today when I was looking for a passage to read, which, you know, even if it's just a window box, you know, cooking, whatever we do, if we can just engage with our hands, otherwise, these are our only power. You know, they're our presence in the world, they're the connection we have. If we lose that, we lose everything.
There's something as well about the imagination, the connection between the imagination.
Sure, I don't mean to put it just down to this, but you know, you imagine, we were talking about ancient man, more ancient man, you know, around the fire in community, chatting. What would they have been doing with their hands? They'd have been making things. And language evolved through that process. Our evolution evolved through that process. You know, now what do we do with these? You know, on the keyboard. Yeah, you know, there's a rebel in me that just wants to shake everything up and have it all fall out and see what's in there.
Yeah, fantastic. If anybody has any questions, please do put your hands up, ask in the chat. I would love, well, people are thinking about whether they want to do that, or maybe it's a question for you to all think about, you know, this idea of what will we leave as our trace, you know. I love that question. You know, you brought it, Jessie. Do you have an idea of what you would like to leave as your trace? What will we be digging up in 1,000 years that you made?
Can I just check? Do you mean Do you mean literally, physically?
Yeah, or imaginatively, or whatever. Yeah. I guess because we're talking about making, but it could be anything. You know, I just love that concept that you mentioned in the beginning about, okay, what will we leave as our human trace?
What immediately came to me, which isn't a physical, well, not an object, but I hope in this realm of my life, I hope is generations of tanners. I so much that to be interacting with an animal, you know, in the way that we have done, as we've talked about, like for our ancestors, to be butchering and then using the skin. It's like so many children are totally into it, and the idea that it's being reawakened here because tanning is so industrialized in the UK, and yeah, so I, in some way,
I think Jessie's frozen there, but I think we got her trace. Elizabeth, do you have a trace? Oh, hang on.
Generations to come that know how to work with, yeah. But in general, most of it won't be left.
Yeah, she's cutting in and out. Thank you so much, Jessie. You cut out slightly there, but I think we got your trace. Elizabeth, what trace?
Well, in terms of material things I've made, quite probably nothing will be left in 1,000 years, unless, you know, they fall into some kind of like bog where things get miraculously preserved. Yeah, I think one of the beauties of plant materials is that they do just disappear again very quickly. You know, but yeah, I loved Jessie speaking about legacy as much as a trace, in terms of a trace, and this sense of, I would love for this earth to be populated with a diversity of plants, even more so than there are now, that that human beings know, that they know in a deep way. And if I can be any part of, you know, recreating that story, then that would be beautiful.
Wow, thank you. And Nick, a legacy from you before we ask this question.
You know, again, I love the fact that for Jessie, Elizabeth, and myself, anything we made would just disappear. You know, I think there's such a beauty in all this stuff rotting away. I really do. And you know, in a way, that's what I would wish for. You know, perhaps my tools would be found. And I wonder, what about all the machinery and all those things and the great tips where all the out-of-date stuff goes? You know, I dread the thought of that. I dread all that, you know, electrical stuff and all that. Is that what people would find in the future? They'd find no evidence of the actual work. They'd just find evidence of the machines that made it. And that's kind of ironic somehow. And we'd be gone as well. Yeah, it's kind of, but you know, when I was writing the book, I went to see Lynn Lovekin, who is a weaver down in Cornwall, and she lives above a tin mine, an old tin mine. Actually, to say old, she just rang me the other day to tell me that they're reopening it, and she was kind of distraught, understandably. And so where she's weaving grown materials that will rot away one day, you know, there was this massive tin mine, the biggest in the whole of Cornwall, right under her land, producing tin and copper and arsenic. So it's kind of that, you know, things that don't go away, things on which a sort of narrative of immortality is built. So I love the fact that the materials we're all using coming out of nature will go back to nature.
Wow, yes, lovely. I've got a question from Mezzy for Jessie. What differences are there in tanning fish skin with oak bark instead of urine? And how long does it take using oak bark? So technical for you.
Yeah, technically. I've actually not tried tanning with urine. I know that might be shocking. I love tanning with bark, and it's so I don't know the difference. Well, I think is preservedness, and we'll be able to do it within the week. So I normally take about a week, but we're going to speed it up with lots of stirring to get it within the 5 days. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about urine, Mezzy? Is that what you do it with?
Yeah, I have, but it's, you know, it's got its downfalls as well. I was just fascinated, yeah, by using oak bark as well. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Does anybody else have anything they would like to say or to ask? Well, it feels like it's been too short a time. Oh, hang on. Okay. Hannah, one from Hannah. What are your most ambitious projects? At this moment, maybe? Nick.
Oh gosh. My most ambitious project. I'm trying to think. Depends how we ambition. Okay. The biggest project I've ever done was to make a whole room like the inside of a 1930s yacht. But that was not the project that stimulated me in the slightest bit. It took me about 5 months to do. Most ambitious project in terms of my own personal ambition is work I do when I look to fuse green woodworking with fine woodwork, when I look to have the piece speak the language of the trees that it's been taken from. And I can't show images of it, but there's a series of furniture I did like that. And that's where it's really quite awkward, because you start using green wood with square-edged wood and they don't want to go together. They don't want to belong together. It's actually a very interesting kind of exercise in realizing why we've gone down the road we've gone as human beings, getting more and more straight-edged, because these worlds don't meet very well. So it's those pieces, you know, I've done all sorts like that, big pieces that take me, you know, ambition often in my work means 3 months, 4 months worth of work on one single piece.
Great, thank you, Nick. Laura, you've got your hand up, and there's a great question here from Kerry. So ridiculously, I actually have to go right now, so I'm going to leave you in Cindy's capable hands. Laura, if you want to ask your question, then I'd love you to look at this one from Kerry, Cindy, if you've got time. So I just wanted to say thank you to all you speakers, and see you next week. It's super exciting that you're actually going to come and visit us. And yes, thank you for coming, everybody. Continue.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Hi. Yeah, just more of a statement and sort of backing up what you were saying, Nick, about I found that sort of mending stuff, and initially driven by a desire to sort of halt my consumption as much as possible, is also a really great way of sort of starting that connection, I suppose, and start you thinking about how you can not get rid of things and stop using things just because they break or tear or whatever. And that process is also very much part of the same thing. And I think in the past, making has maybe been something that's a sort of a bit exclusive to mending, whereas now I feel like that's something that is gaining a bit more power, you know, as a kind of, when I see people wearing things that are mended, I you know, I have a lot of sort of admiration for them, rather than just much more now. I get a lot of pleasure out of seeing people wearing mended stuff than new stuff. It's an interesting sort of transition when you start to try and repair your own things, not just clothes but items as well, you know, and how you can actually do that is a really interesting process.
Well, I love that, because that's, you know, we're encouraged, disposability is just kind of almost seen as a norm, isn't it? You know, and we're encouraged more and more just to throw stuff away. But it's interesting looking at the root of the word to maintain something, to look after it, to maintain it, is matenia, is to hold in your hand. You know, if you maintain something, you have a relationship with it. And so I think that's how I interpret what you're saying, is that in looking after things, we bring them close to us, we nurture them, and we build a relationship. And to me, this whole work is about that. It's about relationship. So I think the mending it's such a lovely thing. I'm so glad you brought it up. It is so important. I obviously here do it with anything wooden. If I have a wool jumper to mend or something, my friend Sue, bless her heart, loves darning, so she does that for me. But you know, so a community of menders. I love the idea of a community of menders.
Thank you, Nick. Did anybody, did you want to add something to that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on how my experiences of mending have taught me so much about an object, and I've actually through mending my own work, when things have happened to it, or you know, if I've made something and it's turned out to not be as strong as I would have hoped, there's just this kind of, there's this learning and deeper understanding that evolves about that item, that's really valuable, that you just don't get if you don't get into that kind of intimate involvement with it, or re-involvement. Yeah, I really want to do more mending in my life as well, and learning to darn is on my list.
I'll join you.
The great enigma of our age. We just need to harness it before all the people that know how to do it are gone.
I feel also that mending is one of those things that just needs time, doesn't it? So much comes back down to time. And once we start engaging, we work things out. We find out how it works. Because I know I often look at things and go, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. And then when I finally engage, because I have to, I kind of learn on the job.
I think as well, it's so much easier. It's actually probably quicker to order a new thing nowadays than it is to fix the old one. And so absolutely. It's actually quite a commitment to try and repair things and buy the parts than it is to just get another one. So, yep. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Nick, that made me think, do you find that making is a way of slowing down and coming back into a natural rhythm with life again?
Absolutely, absolutely. But you know, I think we perhaps need to look at different sorts of making. I know a lot of my work here, because we have, you know, studios and workshops, everything I've built, and we have 2 cabins, is often maintenance and repairing, and I can't always slow down enough because there's so much to do. And if I don't slow down, I don't appreciate it. If I do slow down, I don't get the job done, you know. And there's this whole tension for me between speed. I can work very, very fast, and sometimes I can work fast smoothly, but sometimes it doesn't go that way. And I'm at my best, I know I'm at my best when I get rid of the idea of how much money am I earning from a job, and I just settle into the work, and then it becomes a meditation. But it doesn't always happen. It doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
I imagine it happens more easily for Elizabeth and Jessie, but I might be wrong on that one. It's just woodwork can sometimes, Jessie's smiling, we'll find out why in a second, but you know, woodwork can be quite, what's the word? It can seem like a battle at times, you know, the saws, the tools having to be sharp and everything, you know, and the sheer energy placed into it. So yes, so Jessie, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
My general experience is I think when I get really, when I'm tanning a lot, I get into it. And then when I start teaching, I get the reflection a lot of surprise at how long everything takes. And I think that's the same with so many crafts, like the surprise at how long it actually takes to make something, and how, as a maker, if you're going to stick with your slow method, which is often like not much machinery, and you know, well, like with basket making, you can't really use machinery. If you're going to stick with the slow method, there is a slowing down of oneself, or one's expectations maybe of how fast something is going to become something else. I think I've definitely slowed down my expectations of the final product. Doesn't mean necessarily I'm slow in life. I just try and you kind of do, like Nick was saying, you kind of have to be fast to get a lot done, because everything takes a long time or something. Yeah.
Have we got time for one more? There's one here from Kerry, that to each of you actually, and she's wondering how working with your hands and raw materials has changed your sense of belonging in the world.
Well, Elizabeth, do you want to go first?
Well, I can do, yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful question. I feel like I want to sort of soak it in a little bit and think on it. Has changed my experience of the world. It's
your experience of belonging in the world.
Of belonging in the world. It's woven me into it, I suppose, and to kind of echo what Jessie said earlier as well. It kind of has made me part of this web of being. It's created joy for me. I think that's one of the key things, is that through meeting with plants and spending time in that kind of quieter, slower, much slower space of consciousness that's required to make and to do so with materials that have their own timelines. It draws me down into a slower space, and I think takes my consciousness into a more embodied and reflective state. Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of going there just as I absorb the question, actually. Yeah, it brings me more into being. It's like making is doing, but it helps me to be.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. To me, I can't imagine being alive without making. To me, it's belonging, it's life, it's breath, it's because it's we got this word making, and but actually, engaging with these is essential. So it's and survival. Survival was completely based around it, and it isn't anymore. So I think it's a way of actually reconnecting ourselves. And for me, and belonging. I always like that, breaking belonging down, the longing. Yeah. So absolutely, I can't imagine belonging without making.
Yeah, I feel totally the same as you two, really. I feel that thing of oh, is it working? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Jessie, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I a bit like I said, for me, it's been a big part of my journey into feeling part of the wider web of all life, and making that thing of that is what makes us human, and that being human is another animal in the part of, so many animals are also making, and yeah, so I definitely feel, and I just want to pick up on something Elizabeth said about it kind of answers the previous question about time. I love that you have to, with tanning especially, you're somewhat surrendered to the material. It will tan at its own time. You can do things to speed it up or make it this or that, but essentially the material is working in it at its own pace. And my original teacher said, you're on high time, you're not on your own time. And so it's that kind of dissolving of this modern mindset that's like, I will do this in this period of time, and then by that day I'll do this. And it's like you kind of got to surrender to the natural process, which I feel like helps me belong and try and surrender to the rest of life. Yeah.
Beautifully said, Jessie. Well, thank you. Does anyone have anything final they want to say before we're at 8 o'clock? And this has just been a really exciting discussion, and I'm just really looking forward to next week and getting our hands on some actual material and going out onto the land and seeing what's there and connecting in this way with our hands. Yeah, I would love to have a lot more of that at Embercombe, because I think it's a really beautiful way to connect with nature. And yeah, Nick, were you saying something then?
I was just going to say goodbye, but thank you for everybody, and it's been great. It's been lovely. I look forward to next week too.
Yeah, really looking forward to next week. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.